All right, I think we're live. We are live. Well, so here's our producer, Paige. We always think about on our Exiting is Now podcast how to start a show, right? So I had this all canned because I have a Cleveland Summit mug for our certified exit planning advisors that came through our classes during our 2020 COVID year, right, where we turned everything virtual. We wanted to try to connect our community of advisors back to the kind of EPI story. And what we came up with was this collection of summit mugs telling a story about each one of the summits throughout the years in different locations. So, in all honesty, though, Jesse, I got it because I was like, oh, this would be cool. It's like a Cleveland. This is my Cleveland gang. And then I quickly realized that my buddy here, Jesse, is actually from Cincinnati. So that's maybe ideal, maybe not, depending on where you're at in Ohio. But since Paige walked across the screen here to start our show, Paige is the producer of this show. So we're only about 3 shows into this thing. Right. So give her a lot of credit for kind of coming into the show only 3 episodes in. So with that, we're back here at Exit Is Now with me, your host, Scott Snider. So today, as you kind of loosely saw them introduced, I have 2 very important guests. Before I kind of get into their introductions and kind of let them tell their stories a little bit, for anybody that is listening live, feel free to kind of ping us with questions or comments. I'll try to get to those throughout the show and certainly get some questions answered. I think it's the benefit of doing things kind of live, and you get to kind of know us in a kind of a very authentic and real-time way. So you can also subscribe if you want to kind of follow us, if you will, at exitisnow.com. Mm-hmm. So feel free to dive into there. For those of you that have been following the Exit Is Now podcast, what I wanted to bring to you with this show, really what Paige and I wanted to bring to you with this show, is I would say a real-life look at how the value acceleration methodology is actually implemented live in our own business, the Exit Planning Institute. So throughout the first few shows here, we're bringing in folks that have made impacts on me as a business owner, as a business leader, and have certainly impacted our business along the way. And I think one of the biggest questions we get in the exit planning space, particularly from our audience, which tends to be a lot of business advisors, is we get it as advisors. The owner will eventually kind of get it and come along, right? It's their largest asset we have to harvest. But how do you get the employees buy-in? How to get your executive leaders bought in? And if you listen to Chris in the SEPA program, he talks a little bit, and I guess it's one of my, if Chris is certainly listening, it's one of my points where it's, I think, a great debate. I don't know if this is or isn't, and I want to ask you guys about this as we dive into the show. But Chris kind of teaches that the employee starts to have 2 jobs. They have their current job, and then they have this job of now value creation. And to me, it's kind of hard. If I'm sitting in your shoes as an employee, I'm like, dude, well, I'm already working 50 hours a week. Now I got to work another 4. Like I'm working 90 hours a week now. So I want to dive into that question. So before we do, just a couple of formal introductions. So Paige is our Director of Marketing here at the Exit Planning Institute. Jesse is our Director of Business Development. Jesse actually runs the largest team that we have here, both the member experience and the business development team. But certainly that's important. But I think what's even more important, I get to call these 2 folks near and dear friends of mine, all kind of growing a company together with the rest of us here at EPI, and great friends with their spouses. So if Kurt and if Jessica are listening in, haven't seen you guys. Well, I guess I saw Kurt last night. I play soccer with her husband. So thanks for tuning in and giving us some time with your significant other. So, Jesse, let's start with you. Jesse, I've known Jesse for nearly 20 years now. That's pretty friggin' wild. Right. And I think what you guys share, you and Paige, is you have kind of a unique and maybe cool story on your EPI journey, right? Like, how did you get here, and then how did you get in to the director role at EPI? And given my 20-year relationship, maybe you could shrink that down to the last couple of years.
I'll do my best. I do think it does go back those 20 years, just kind of meeting you when we were both actually just starting college, if you can believe that. And, from that time, not exactly the best of friends throughout this entire period, but have always been mutual acquaintances and all the way up to being, seeing each other basically every day, especially post-college. I graduated during the recession back in 08, 09, and jobs were pretty tough to come by. So luckily at the time you had owned and were operating your landscaping company. So you were kind enough to put me on a weed whacker, just chopping down sidewalks. But that really was a bridge for me personally to get to my first job. And I've been in sales my entire career. So my first job after weed whacking was in outside sales. Industrial construction supplies, and went into software sales after that, and very quickly became a manager of a team. Fast forward a couple years later, I didn't necessarily enjoy the company I was working for. They did not prescribe or even have any clue what value acceleration or building significant companies might look like. And I was looking for a job, so I'd actually had offers from 3 different companies. And I met you out for your birthday.
You did?
And I said, Scott, I know you're a business owner. I don't exactly know what you do. And at the time, he was owning and operating the Exit Planning Institute. But I said, as a business owner, give me your opinion on this. What do you think of these different companies, these different offers? And you and I, sat around, maybe talked for 15, 20 minutes about that. And then the next day, you'd sent me a text and said, would you ever consider working for me? I said, I don't know. What do you do?
What do you do?
So fast forward, ended up having some really good conversations with you and your dad, Chris Snider. Okay. And, it felt like a great opportunity. So ended up passing on those other 3 and coming here about 5 years ago now. It's been fantastic.
I was talking to you about that this morning via text, doing some show prep. And I always have the saying, I don't care if you've been here really at EPI for like a year. I always say, if you know me well, I take my business, it's almost like my family, right? I probably spend more time with all of you than I literally do with my family. And so I was like, when you sent me 5 years, I was like, dude, I thought it was much longer than that, right? But yeah, and I think that, Jesse came in as our first real salesperson that spent really is 100% of his time on sales work. And I think that's kind of significant as you go through the story a little bit, because he was one of the originals, right? Before we had 20-something employees at EPI, we had like 5.
Yeah.
And so, and he's really taught me about sales strategy, sales approach. And he's taught me to take a softer style with people. We were just talking about that literally today. So Paige, also interesting. Before COVID, what I always think about Paige is she was super hungry and ambitious. And you were the first virtual employee I had, but way before our pandemic. So tell us kind of the same story, like how'd you get to where you're at EPI today?
Yeah, so I started as our intern, actually, back, I think it was like a month or 2 after Jesse
It's like our first serious intern, too.
Yeah, it was about a month or 2 after Jesse started. I started as our intern, came in the marketing department, and then stayed the whole summer. And then about when I would go back to school, I would typically get a job down at Miami when I would go back to school. And I figured, why not just ask and see if I could do it virtually? I just heard about a couple virtual jobs that my friends were getting. I feel like it was before COVID, so it was before virtual jobs. I mean, I guess
it was before even, Zoom was probably around, but it was even before probably that, right?
That. Yeah, so I asked, and you guys were like, absolutely, that would be great.
You should have seen me in the background, though. Like, I might be a millennial, but I'm maybe more baby boomer in my mentality, right? Like having somebody work remotely,
terrifying
to me. Like me and Jesse were talking, like we were all talking about it. Like
I wasn't terrified.
Yeah, everybody was terrified. Like, dude, you just need to go with her because she's hugely valuable to what we're doing here. Right. So like if she wants to work remotely, just do it. And I'm like, take a deep breath. And now here we are. We work like the majority of the week, 3 out of the 5 business days remotely. So here we are.
So then
continue.
You're fine. So then I went to Miami and I was our marketing assistant there. I came back about once a month to, check in, show you that I was really getting stuff done down there still. And then once I graduated, I was then our marketing, I think it was our coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Moved up to our marketing manager about 1.5 years ago. And now I am our director of marketing. I think since December. So
yeah. So the only 2 directors that we have, they round out our leadership team here at EPI. I have another 3 folks as well that sit on that executive leadership team. So these 2 folks have certainly had a lot of personal impact in my life, but for our listeners that really interact with our community and our organization, certainly a ton of impact for the EPI community and the SEPAs themselves. So again, if you guys, now that you kind of got to know them, if you have questions, feel free to fire them in, and we can, I'll try to get them over to Jesse and Paige. Mm-hmm. So as I opened up and I get this question all the time when I'm facilitating SEPA programs, people ask, again, I get how the owner's mentality is. I certainly get it as a professional advisor, but how do I get buy-in for the employee, and then how do they kind of take this all in? So I want to take this journey over the next few minutes, I guess, with everybody, talking about value acceleration from an employee's perspective, from an executive leader's standpoint, and from a business owner's standpoint. So let's just back up. So Jesse, you kind of alluded to the fact that we're sitting around talking, and you're like, Exit Planning Institute, I get it. Like, what do you and your dad do? You guys like funeral directors.
Yeah.
And I had to explain what exit planning was. So now here 5 years and really deep into it, both as somebody that's a learner, right? Somebody that has come through, read the books, and probably knows value acceleration as best as anybody else. Mm-hmm. And now kind of living it on the executive team. If I were to ask you, like, what does exit planning mean to you? How would you define it?
It's a pretty big question, but I would say it comes back to me a lot of what Chris talks about in his book, specifically around the 4 C's. Those are just the items that jump out to me, and it's really having the business owner being aware of those 4 C's and not just giving you a pat on the back if you do a good job in one of those areas, but actually highlighting the fact that they are moving the company forward in ways that are exponential at times. So, I think about culture, for example. Like Chris says in his book, culture is everything. It's a direct quote from him. And it makes a big difference. And culture is kind of this weird, nebulous word, like what does that even mean? But for me, it's working and being present at a job where it feels good. You feel like you're getting something out of it besides a paycheck, and you're seeing progress. You're seeing growth. I just took this survey this week on behalf of our marketing team,
yeah.
And they ask you to pick 3 words to help you describe your company, and one of my 3 words was growing. Like that concept of growth or moving the company forward is just a big part of a value acceleration minded company and owner. Another small example of that is when I started here. You talk about culture. A lot of times the values that you put up on your wall and that you talk about, they set the tone for that. And you can check yourself against your values. Is the decision I'm making today, tomorrow, day in and day out in my job, does it align with what my company wants us to do? And when I started here 5 years ago, our values were really hard to compare myself against.
Yeah.
And I want to say, how long have we had our new values? Did we do those in 2001? Are they 2 years old now?
I think it was 2020.
Okay.
I think
It was probably coming out of the
2020.
pandemic.
Okay.
It's a story that I certainly want to tell for the audience,
Yeah.
right? Because I think Jesse's onto something, right? There's this big pivot when we're all kind of forced to pivot, right? We're forced to pivot, but when you step back and kind of reevaluate who you are. But I think that, I think that core values, I've certainly learned, are a key driving factor for many employees and culture overall.
Yeah, and I guess just to round that out for you, Scott, the reason I brought up the values things, I think it demonstrates that ownership, specifically you and Chris, in this example, were willing not to just say, well, it is the way it is. That's the way we've always done it. You actually recognize, hey, culture's big for us. It's one of the 4 C's. And if we're hearing that we need to make some adjustments, some improvements, and move the company forward specific to our core values, let's do that. Like, that's a good idea. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, if you've got a business owner, folks running a company where some of the employees are saying, perhaps something's a little bit out of alignment here, whether it's mission, vision, or values, I think 9 times out of 10 that conversation is going to get squashed.
Yeah, I think so.
I just think it demonstrates our company's commitment to really hearing your employees and moving the company forward.
So, Paige, same question for you. I think this is interesting as well, right? Because your team creates all of the content at the Exit Planning Institute, right? So, like Jesse, you and your team are probably pretty well versed, whether it's direct from our faculty or the expansion through the through the whole SEPA community. But same question. So when you hear, if I was just somebody on the street and I said, hey, well, what is exit planning? What does it mean to you?
Gosh, I think it's really vast. But it's hard to explain, but I think Jesse does a really good job. It feels synonymous with the 4 C's. And so like you said, my team does a lot of the content and kind of like the structural capital side of things. It's pretty easy for us to document what we do because we have to document it anyway. So it's always in those SOPs and building a lot of structural capital. But I guess how I would describe it to someone on the street or what I do is exit planning is just a lot of intentionality. I think
that's a great answer.
It takes a lot more intentionality than just coming in every day. It's something that you challenge myself and the team with a lot is, okay, sure, you want to do this initiative or whatever it is, but what value is it going to drive? You have to think in terms of not just initial ROI, but 2 years from now, 3 years from now, even simple things as like a social post or a graphic. And it makes us very intentional and make sure that we're always thinking about that.
Yeah, so if you've heard me talk about Paige in the past too, and you certainly know this, Paige in her first review as like a manager sat down at her annual review with me as her, I guess, direct boss and the owner of the company, and she says, Scott, here it is, and we have our reviews tend to be kind of more conversational, and she got a raise, and she got what I considered a nice bonus, and given I know Paige, you could just see that she was, there was something that she wanted to talk about, right? And I was like, oh man, like I thought everything was, I thought these were all good, and not to say that they weren't, right?
They were great.
Not putting, not to put, but when she expressed herself, she expressed just that, and I don't, it's very logical that you would approach exit planning that way, where she said, Scott, I was taught to talk about value and income. So Paige always comes to her reviews with like notes like I have, and she had one thing that drove income, right? And then she said, but look at all this stuff that also we might have not have received new revenue, new net profit from it today, but this is positioning us for more long-term value. So what I find interesting about the two of them, though, is that they've approached exit planning. I like the intentional thing. I totally agree with that. But we've kind of both approached it from the 4 C's.
Yeah.
And it's something for me as a business owner really connects, right? Because I think it's the way, whether it's our directors or the owner themselves, I think it's the way, that's the comfortable way. I think it's nice for our advisors out there because it's the way in which we should approach owners because it's something that naturally we do. We just need to make it more intentional every day, right? We need to not just do the marketing strategy, but we need to document the entire thing. We need to understand our buyer personas. We need to understand our sales approach. And then we need to document it and not just set it on a shelf, but document it, then live within it. So given these kind of intangible capitals, right, we're kind of missing this personal, financial, and personal, and we'll circle back around to that. But what I have started to talk about certainly over the last 30 days as we entered the new year was living this value acceleration-centric lifestyle. And maybe whether you guys know it or not, I do think that you guys live it yourself. So, Jesse, there's a story that you shared with me yesterday.
Yeah.
Jesse's an elder. Is that what you
Elder,
call it?
that's
An
the right
elder,
word.
right? Elder at his church. And, EPI has kind of used, to maybe frame it for the audience, has used maybe 3 things over the last 3 or 4 years that have really helped us put truly on a value acceleration path. It's a combination of Chris's value acceleration methodology. We use, and for any EOS implementer out there, right, we're not pure, so sorry,
Don't yell at us.
we're not, don't yell at us. We take bits and pieces of that. And then we went through this leadership transformation training and program, if you will, with Initiative 1 that brought some of that communication and culture to us as well. So between the 3, I think that has really put us down now this very intentional value acceleration path. But I thought Jesse shared an interesting story about him being an elder at his church and how similar things from the value acceleration methodology and other things that have helped support us has helped him be a better elder at his church. You mind sharing kind of a little bit about how that has affected you as a leader outside of just being the director of business development?
Yeah, I'm glad to. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head specifically with Initiative 1 and the work that we did with them back in, we started that in March of 2020, April, like legitimately right after the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And I think that was a godsend. I think we really needed that in order to come together as a team and move forward in what was just a completely chaotic time. But out of that, I saw growth. Once again, going back to that word, I saw, you change as a leader here at the company. I saw growth amongst, individuals like Paige, myself, our team. Our communication style evolved in a very natural and needed way, just to be more open and honest. Like, we have this phrase that we use all the time now, which we picked up or more or less stole from Initiative One, about like putting things on the table. Like, we all know what the elephant in the room is, but if that's really the biggest problem, that's the biggest issue, like, let's address that. And it's not personal. It's not about your mama.
Right.
And let's just talk about it, because professionally, this isn't going to work long term if we don't address this under the table stuff and put it on the table. I think specifically in my role as an elder, I'm one of 12 elders at a very large church here on the west side of Cleveland, and our church has 89 employees. So this is a bigger organization than even our company here at EPI. So just taking forward some of the stuff that I've learned in and through Initiative One training, value acceleration, and even EOS, kind of taking that to the table, the elder board table, and sharing some of my insights of how do we do things like Initiative One talks about consensus-driven leadership. So there's two ways to run a business. You could be a dictator, or you can rely on people that you trust, that are trustworthy, and you value their feedback. So you go to your senior leadership team like you do, Scott, and come to Paige and myself and say, here's an issue, here's an idea, do we want to do this, what do we want to do? And we talk about it, open and honest on the table. And once again, I think 9 times out of 10 you say, yeah, let's do that. Like we generally come to an agreement here. And I think that's healthy. So that consensus-driven leadership mindset or model, I think it allows you, because if you are a dictator, the business is only going to be as big as you are as an owner. It's going to stop at one. It's going to stop at that owner. But if you use the power of your team, now you've just expanded it in so many different directions.
Well, and I think that's also helped us decentralize Scott a little bit as well. That's consensus-driven leadership. I know that we've decentralized Chris, and now we're trying to decentralize you a little more. But now that we have that consensus-driven leadership, makes it a little bit easier around here.
Well, I think it does. I think that, it makes it a hell of a lot more uncomfortable for me, right? As if you're an owner listening to the show, right? I think that's the biggest thing, right? Getting this kind of comfortable being uncomfortable. But I would say, too, Paige, from your perspective as a younger or young leader, right? I think that Chris and the faculty at the SEPA program talk about it being almost like this generational education tool. We had one of our friends that too go to one of our owner roundtables locally, and he came out of there, called me, and goes, Scott, I learned more about exit planning in that 2-hour session than I did my entire, or really not exit planning. He said I learned more about growing and running a business than I did really ever shadowing my dad and ever at a college. And so I kind of want to round out the conversation with, as a young leader, and now, maybe 3 years into your executive team journey and like 30 days into your director role, and you have a big team too of like 5 or 6 people, how has it helped you be a better leader along the way, knowing some of these things that we embrace with those, value acceleration and things of that nature?
I think with all of the leadership trainings that we've done, especially with Initiative One, or the decision dynamics that we did with RFN, was also really helpful. To kind of, I guess, trust my gut a little bit more, or lean on people like Jesse or even Jocelyn, and not just you for decisions as well, or things that we need to do. And I think starting here, it was my first real internship, so it's all I really know is value acceleration methodology. It's all,
you're like me.
This is just how you run a business. So I've kind of adapted that into the decisions that I make, using that as well as the leadership training that we've done.
Cool. All right, folks, we're going to take our first break, so just give a quick couple of minutes, grab another cup of coffee, water, beer, whatever you guys are drinking, and we'll see you back just in a couple minutes.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
Everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. I have my friends and colleagues here at the Exit Planning Institute talking about how value acceleration has come alive in our own business, how it's made us better executive leaders, better employees, and how we're starting to kind of embrace it here. Again, if you've been listening since the start of the show, I think it's one of the biggest questions that we get at EPI is how do we embrace it as employees, as a team, and how does it bleed through the organization? So if you tuned in from the start, we just kind of finished up talking about how it's kind of affected their life, and both Jesse and Paige have I guess alluded to this decentralization of the owner. So I want to play with that a little bit and go a little bit deeper, right? Peel the layer of the onion back. What I also think that I heard a lot from Jesse and Paige, and it is a core value for us. Mm-hmm. It should be as a education company, as a professional education company at EPI, is this sense of purposeful growth. So we've talked about some of the training programs we did. We've talked about some of the programs that we have come through. But I think that if I was a listener, I would say that's one of the things that I'm writing down, right? And I do think that value acceleration, the value acceleration methodology, the concepts of this, is a kind of an always be learning and growing mentality, right? I think if Chris was here, Chris would say that it's something along the lines of, I'll probably screw this up, but something along the lines of, a company that's not ready to grow isn't ready to exit, or maybe it's vice versa, right? If you're not ready to exit, you're not ready to grow. So they kind of go hand in hand, right? If you have a stagnant company, you're probably going to have a really crappy exit. But if you have a mentality of, not only do we want to literally grow the company, revenue, net profit, and all those types of things, but we want to grow as people and leaders of really any age. So I kind of want to talk about now how it's coming alive here, right? Sitting on our executive team, we have another 3 people that surround the 3 of us. We have Chris also as well on our team, on the executive team, and then roughly, I guess, 15 other employees here at EPI. And I'd like to think that we do a really nice job of embracing what Chris has taught all of us, not just as educators and advisors, but as executives and owners. So, Paige, maybe I'll just toss a question over to you, right, is that you kind of talked about this decentralization, and you're absolutely right. I think in 2020, we saw this decentralization of the majority owner, kind of the face of the Exit Planning Institute, the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider. And we can all probably agree, advisor, business owner, executive, that centralizing the business around any one individual, whether it's just content, leadership, operations, makes for a business that could be not ready for transition. So can you talk about, though, really the last couple of years, embracing some of the training that we've had, how we have now started to say, okay, now that we've decentralized Chris and he can concentrate highest and best use in what he loves to do, how can we start to do that with Scott, or how have we? And how has it affected you and your team, or how have you seen it come alive, this decentralization now of me as an owner, and almost as an empowerment for you guys? To me, it's got to be a little scary, right? Because we're saying, like, here's the keys, Paige, drive your Ford Bronco or whatever the car that you like. So how have you seen, it's a true thing. She literally likes Ford Broncos. You're not a Ford guy.
Not really a Ford guy, no.
But,
no.
well, I'm a Ford man, so I was shocked that she wants to get this, like, 1980s Ford Bronco. But that's neither here nor there. I would say, talk to us about how this embracing of value acceleration has come alive over the past couple of years at EPI, and how we've begun to really decentralize me. But I would also challenge to say, has it started to decentralize you? So you begin to empower some of the other people on your team, and it's just this ripple effect.
So I think it's happening in tiers, I would say.
Right. Okay.
Like we have, I think, decentralized Chris for the most part. Then we move on to decentralizing you, and I think it takes just a lot of, it's one of our core values, accountability with authority.
Yep.
Which means basically leaning on this training that we've done and making the decision and not relying so much on you. I think it's also forced you a little bit to train myself and other people on the team on different decisions that you would make. I think the brand was focused for so long around you and Chris, and that was in your heads for so long. And so we've forced you to kind of train us and document that, so that way I can decentralize myself and train the team as well. So I'd say we did a really great job of decentralizing Chris. We're about halfway there with you, at least in my mind, on the marketing team. And then it's tough on the marketing team, though, to decentralize myself. Everyone has different roles. Mm-hmm. So Colleen's our content strategist. Jenna does our chapters. There's different people for different things. So making sure that I'm training every aspect of what I do into everyone takes a little bit more, I would say. But definitely I work with every person on the team to make sure that they're able to do everything that I do.
I smile, Paige, because that's exactly how I feel, right? Is that right? So you're starting to feel, right, when it's uncomfortable a little bit.
Absolutely.
Or maybe, I think it is uncomfortable. I think call it what it is. Yeah. I think it is. But what you're also saying is, who's the next Chris or who's the next Scott, right? So it's like, okay, Paige specializes in marketing, understands the business as an executive leader. Jesse sponsors or specializes in sales, knows stuff as an executive leader. But as an owner, right, and for many owners that might be listening, I don't care what size business you have, thinking about what Jesse was saying about the 4 C's, I do a little bit of structural capital. I do a little bit of culture building. I do a little bit of team leading. I work a lot with our customers. So as an owner, right, we always talk about these kind of many hats. So you're starting to experience, and I smile because I'm like, oh, thank God somebody finally understands me, that this is probably how Chris felt 3 years ago. This is how I'm feeling now. And then, and I think it's actually kind of the beauty and value acceleration is what you're seeing come alive, because now Paige is saying, okay, how do I decentralize myself, right? So something like the 5 Ds that we talk a lot about at EPI, these things that kill a business, right? These things that are involuntary, that are almost forced upon us, can happen at the executive level, or the owner level. So Jesse, same question kind of, over to you. Being here, 5 years now, how, and seeing this company go from 5 people to 20-something people and exponential growth inside of the EPI community overall, how have you seen value acceleration kind of come alive, and kind of talk to us about this tiered approach to kind of decentralizing all of us?
Well, unlike you and Paige, it doesn't make me as anxious.
Right.
But there's not many things that I feel like do here.
Right.
Right. But I've seen it happen in a couple of different iterations over the past 5 years. You already mentioned I was the original and the only salesperson when I took the role. And since then, we've grown the team to having 4 business development managers now.
Right.
And I don't carry a book. I don't have a quota. And I know that was very scary for you a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'm taking my best sales guy, and you're just going to manage people now?
Yes.
It's like, oh, gosh.
Yes. But I think it really behooves us as directors and managers, people that sit on this leadership team, to trust the process enough to know that you got to kind of hold 2 things loosely. I am more valuable because I've figured out a way to add enough structural capital, add enough people, kind of that people component, that I've got people that are cross-trained, understand what I do day in and day out, and I'm willing to relinquish some of that control because I know it makes the company more valuable.
Right.
Even though I've now taken something that was on my plate, which is a scary thing for someone, and say, somebody can do this, and the company can actually do this without me because I set the stage appropriately. That's just a scary proposition for a lot of people. But if you do really hold on to the value acceleration mindset of the owners, my company, they see what I did and understand that I've actually exponentially increased the value of this company because I'm willing to kind of give up control and cede that to other people. And I think it's a little bit easier in a sales role because everybody on our 2 teams, I don't care if you're on the business development team or the member experience team, they all look at their clients or the people that they're working with on the front end, and they're running their own little mini business inside of this company. So they want to make sure that people are getting problems solved for through solutions, no matter what that solution is here, or if they're a member, if they're a SEPA in this example, that their needs are also being met. So everybody in our company, specifically to those 2 teams, are empowered to treat their specific book, if you want to call it that, as a little business inside the business.
So Jesse, I think you hit on a couple of things that are also. And honestly, I've been a business owner since I've been 16 years old, right? So I think I had one job. I was like a janitor at my all-boys high school, right? So I don't know, honestly. I say that just to say that truthfully, if I'm putting it on the table and I'm trying to relate to you, I don't really know what it's like to be you guys because I've almost always, from 16 to now 37, worked for myself. And I think you hit on a couple of things that I think for the audience is interesting to understand. Jesse talked a lot about, I know that these things that I'm doing drives a lot of value. And I think, so not only the question is buy-in, right? And then the next question is momentum. So in all honesty, at least today, you're driving a lot of value for me. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right? So as the business owner at the end of the day, and that's the risk that the business owner takes, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But to hear an employee talk about the amount of value that he brings to the table, I mean, it's, again, great for me. But is there a sense for you that says, like, well, I want a bite of the apple, right? Like, I think the next question after I've been empowered and I'm bought in and I want to live, as Paige said, this value and income kind of approach, how do you begin to kind of incentivize or empower the employee to kind of dig in and believe in income and value, though at the end of the day, a lot of the value goes to the owner? So what do you think about that? I just think it's interesting.
That's a good question. I think if I could maybe just pinpoint one specific example, part of the exit planning process, the value acceleration process, is I think you need to, as an owner, open up to your, at the very least, your leadership team. But I think even more impactful is to the entire company as to where your head's at. What are you thinking long term? What is our 10-year vision here? What do we want to do in the next 3 years as far as the strategy goes? And what do we want to do in the next 1 year? And I'll even use this phrasing that we use inside of the Exit Planning Institute, that business is personal. And when you try to divorce what's going on in your personal life from your business life, you're doing a huge disservice to your employees. But if you're willing to be vulnerable, which is a really tough thing for a lot of people, I know it's tough for you, But if you're willing to do that, I mean, you talk about building up some reservoir of trust and really looking to your owners not as just a boss, but as a leader. And that's a game changer. And I think when you start seeing that lived out and you're hearing it week out, you see it at a quarterly renewal, you see it at an annual strategic retreat, buying's just that much easier.
I think, Paige, so for you too, it's like, okay, you're still, again, you're young in your career, right? So eventually, right, the Exit Planning Institute will be sold and transitioned, right? And from an employee's perspective, right, I believe just laying it on the table, right? I mean, we're here to grow businesses and sell it at some point, right, when it's right for all of us. But in all honesty, I thought you made a good comment too. It's like you're kind of like me in the sense that you kind of grew up in value acceleration, right? So, but can you talk to me a little bit about what that feels like? What's the culture like? Like Jesse talked about quarterly renewals, and I guess what I'm trying to get to too is this: what's it feel like for the employee, and why should I care? Given that, again, I might not participate in the upswing of value, but what does it do? Like, we got the quarterly renewals, we just implemented these jam sessions. Again, I'd like to think as an owner that we've created a really fun culture here of, kind of like Jesse said, at every desk, at every door in the office, it's like Paige Inc., right? It's almost your own business within a business. But can you talk about how, whether it's here at EPI, whether it's maybe looking forward in the future, what are those things that make value acceleration kind of a culture that everybody kind of lives within? What makes it valuable outside of the tangible cash that might be involved?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Big one.
I know.
I'm like dishing harder questions over to Paige for sure.
I guess to answer your question just broadly, I think it's, I don't know, just beyond the value, it's how you lead as well.
Yeah.
So I think people care around here, and people, have their own little Paige Inc. or Colleen Inc., whatever, because of how Chris was as a leader and how you are as a leader. I think that the way you describe it makes people care. And then I think then that tiers on to Jesse and I, who then, lead our teams to understand that value and see what they're doing every day that contributes to it. So I think I don't know. I think it's a really tough question. It's hard to describe a culture almost, and like what drives people to do what they do. But I think, it's hard to describe.
I have one example that comes specifically out of quarterly renewals. When Paige and we were first working here 4 years ago, even 5 years ago, we would do these quarterly renewals is what we call them, but it's a whole company workshop, and we say, what happened last quarter? What are we going to do next quarter? What are our big rocks? But we always do a start-stop exercise. And we say, what are the things that we should start doing to be a better company, both internally and externally, and what are the things that we should stop doing? Do you remember how long our stop doing list used to be?
It's like 4 or 5 of those big sticky notes.
Yes. And the same thing for the start. Like, here are all these great ideas and opportunities, and why don't we start capitalizing on these things? But if you remember the last couple of quarterly renewals that we've had, we'll look at our stop sheet, and it's like, that's it? Just those?
2 or 3 or
that's
maybe
it?
a handful of things?
And a couple of them we can immediately implement.
But my point in telling that story is, when you see progress like that, you're not just talking the talk, like you're walking the walk. You're moving the company forward.
Well, I think to add into that as well, when we talked about decentralizing you and Chris, I think something in Walking to Destiny, something that we teach a lot about is that's not only decentralizing you guys so that people aren't tied to you. People are tied to the company. They're tied to our methodology. They're tied to our core values. So I think you guys do a great job of doing that as well.
I think if I was in the audience I wrote down some notes as both of them kind of were sharing their insights. 3 things that I think really stand out to me, right? That certainly are a part of the value acceleration methodology, but are like these deeply rooted things. Like, I think that for us, when the question is, well, do you think value acceleration is hard to implement? There's a part of me that wants to go, well, not really. I mean, it's a step-by-step process, right? Like, Dad was a Price Waterhouse guy. It's like almost like a paint by number. How hard is this thing? But really, once you get in there, it's really a culture thing, right? Like Jesse's been living in it for 5 years. You've been living in it 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I started a
and
month
it's the only
after
thing that
Jesse,
you
yeah.
know, and it's also the only thing that I know. So I can only imagine going up to an owner that has owned his company for 25 years and saying, I want you to run this methodology, but it's actually what you find is to be a huge culture changer. So I think core values, I think purpose, I think leadership. So I want to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you guys, I want to talk about what would be your recommendations when you approach other employees that are embracing value acceleration. So we'll see you guys back here in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So we kind of take into this value acceleration journey from the employee's perspective over the last 45 minutes or so with each other. And I wanted to ask both Paige and Jesse if you had a friend, right, that said, hey, I actually met with they have hired they've hired a certified exit planning advisor to come in and begin this value acceleration methodology, what the hell is that going to be like? What does it mean for me? Because it sounds like there's a lot of change that's going to happen. What would you recommend?
I think the big thing that almost any employee is, so if you're bringing in a CEPA, your company's going to change. Change is hard, right? Change is scary. And a lot of employees are rightfully so just very skeptical of that. Especially if you're talking about a family business, maybe it's a couple of generations old. Like, they've always been doing things this way. Why is this time gonna be different? And I think in some instances it's appropriate and healthy to be skeptical, but I would advise those employees to have an open mind. Ask this question. Say, what if I'm wrong? What if they prove me wrong? And I think if you have that posture, that kind of mindset, it's going to allow you to be more patient and allow that opportunity for growth and change to actually take place.
Yeah.
Paige, same question over to you.
To answer your question, yes, there's definitely going to be change, and that it is a huge culture changer as well as just internally in your processes and what you're doing. I think that, yes, even though things are going to change, it's definitely for the better. And like I said at the beginning of the show, it's definitely a lot of intentionality that you're going to have to change. It's not just as willy-nilly in things that you're doing. You have to be much more strategic and intentional, and just to be supportive during this time. during the change.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I think one of the biggest things that the two of them have done for me and for Chris, for that matter, is be supportive. So, and I think it's critical that one of the first things, maybe outside of like core values, is that you need a great team to actually develop those core values. So I think that it's been a really cool ride since, honestly, the pandemic, where we were able to kind of look internally at who we are and make a very deliberate and intentional effort to follow value acceleration and begin to mitigate risk inside of our businesses. I'm going to have you guys back on another show, right? Because we concentrated a lot about business, which is, I think, where owners tend to go, right? Even their executive teams is where we know. Yeah. But I think the next show that I'll probably have you guys on, I want to talk about the personal and financial. One of the other core values we have at the Exit Planning Institute is a balance, right? And that is this personal purpose, personal balance that we recommend to the business owners. But I want to thank you guys both for hanging out. Paige, thanks for your patience. I know you'd rather be behind the glass producing the show. Jesse, thanks for coming out, not selling anything, and just hanging out with us. But two unbelievably great people. I would say, look, if you guys don't know them, our team tends to be pretty open. So if you are a business owner starting to go down your value acceleration journey, you want opinions and you want your directors to talk to mine, I would highly recommend connecting to these two individuals. They've been, honestly, guys, phenomenal, not just as an owner, as an entrepreneur, and I'm trying to get emotional on air. Paige, I don't think, has ever seen that. Jesse certainly has. But you've made me a better person, so thank you for that. So, folks, our show's come to an end, so we will be back on every other Wednesday, so February 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern Time live. We talked about them today, actually, two people that have had a major impact on the Exit Planning Institute and the lives of the three of us. Fred and Tracy Johnson from Initiative One Leadership Institute. They have a program that is this transformational leadership program. I can't wait to talk to them about this more personal side of exit planning. So please tune in next week, 1 p.m. or in 2 weeks, February 22nd, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The podcast show today will be up live on Monday on all of your podcast platforms. With that, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.